Hannah, I have a binder for you. You come here. These are all of the, Mr. Parrott's songs. Full text. No. There's F. Is it song with words? I don't know.
Those chairs.
Hannah, are you the only one?
Probably.
You wanna go with Pastor Joe and the boys? You should.
Or do you wanna go with Val?
Or stay with me.
Or stay? Up to you.
Sybil should be here.
Val.
Val?
I think Sybil will be here.
Okay.
Unless she's picking up Jeff from.
I think she had to pick Jeff up from the airport.
It's not fair.
And actually, Bill and Alicia are coming, so we'll have Lucy and Jess. Are you doing Sunday school with Pastor Joe? There he is. Go.
Hey Jennifer.
Hi.
Hey, buddy.
Good morning.
Did you get a chance to? Where you want them to stage? It's not a free country. Did you get to see this? There's a delusion that people are treat themselves as a religion.
Okay. questions you know more than me?
Where's my laptop?
That's all I know on this topic. Now, if you wanna know if I cleaned most of the dishes in my house yesterday, that is true because I let Freya and Ellen experiment. So every metal bowl and every glass, cause I don't have any plastic anymore, which is a bad choice on my part. Because Freya broke one of the glass ones and then she had a meltdown. And I'm like, it's just a glass. It's all my fault. I'm like, I was roughhousing with you. Who's the adult here?
Yeah.
I'm the adult. I knew it was there. And it's just a glass. And quite frankly, since your mom moved out, we've broken like maybe 5. Your mom, Justin, Josh, they used to get us a regular tin of them glasses.
We just use, like our recycling jars, like, you know, pasta sauces, become our glasses.
Yeah.
And then we just have, like, you never have to buy any.
Oh, yeah, no, I know that, yeah, no, that makes sense, yeah.
Candy jars.
Also, did you give Lola a bag?
Nope.
I am off Thursday and Friday, I can get that. I know she needs one, that's why I'm saying I'm off Thursday.
We should have just cleaned some of the shower.
Well, can we
You
do
know
that?
that's not gonna be possible.
Yeah, that's coming.
Be a family of all this month. I don't know if there'll be, we might be camping.
I have no idea.
This might be it.
Is it 10 already?
They also made us food for the best date ever.
Food? What'd you put?
It was, concoction.
Someone left the battery.
Oh, the kids did?
Yes.
Nice. Like real food. Not edible, but real.
I was gonna say.
They picked all the strawberries that were ripe, which is good.
Okay.
They made them into strawberry drinks, which was good. If they'd have just put the hose water into the glass, it would have been fine. But they put the hose water into the flower pots. And then they used that.
Ew.
And then they used lemon
No
juice,
batteries?
which also would have been not bad with strawberries and the lemon.
Looks
Then they made, crackers with peanut butter on them. And crackers with peanut butter, they did crushed crackers with it. And then they added a little water to that.
Stop at step 1.
I know.
Like you were good. Nope, we've gone too far.
You've gone over the edge. And then they used jelly,
Uh-oh.
which also wasn't bad, until you mix it with water.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of soggy crackers.
Did you come with this?
No, they said we're trying to make this the best day ever for you. Do you wanna crush their little souls? So
What
you
is it? Thanks,
take
but no
bites and
thanks.
wait for them to disappear so you can throw food far, far away.
Give it to Lola.
Lola didn't even want to come out. She wanted no part of that.
She's like, nah.
Test. Oh man, why isn't this working?
We use the wine glasses to make desserts with our
That's it?
well, and a little lime juice, so it wasn't bad.
Isn't liquid death just plain water?
It's just sparkling water.
Liquid water.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like an Italian
Oh.
soda.
It's working.
Not too bad.
Don't they mix the strawberries in the bake?
One.
They had fun, but my glasses are clean and so are all my metal bowls.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mary, do you want to open us up in prayer this morning?
Yeah. Dearly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for bringing us here safely. I pray for those who are still traveling here. Please let all of us, and that we may glean something from it. I also pray for this afternoon as we go to Justin and Sarah's house, that we will have a safe trip there and a fun time. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
We're gonna die.
Why? Why? Every time. Every time.
Well, there's your answer.
Got it? All right, quick recap. So, Rome is being led by Constantine. There's two emperors left, Constantine and Licinius. Constantine institutes the Edict of Milan in 313, which basically reverses all the persecution on the Christians. And the churches, the main Christian movement begins, especially the Western churches, begin reinstating those bishops and clergy and deacons who had left the church during the persecution. They turned over Holy Scriptures, and the Western churches start reinstating them to their previous positions. And there's an individual in Africa who was Donatist, who opposed what the church was doing and had the viewpoint that those leaders in the church who had basically denounced Christ and had turned over Holy Scriptures should not retain their position or be reinstated. And so he started basically, and he was from, did I say already, North Africa. So a schism arose. He labeled those leaders to be traitors or traitor. And in Carthage, the main church, the primary movement, would set deacons in front of the jails and prevent people during the persecution from coming and supporting those Christians that were jailed. And one such deacon was Cecilian, who eventually became the bishop of Carthage. Cecilian was one of those individuals that would station himself in front of the jails. So there was now a rivalry between Donatist and Cecilian, and Cecilian supported the Western churches and reinstating those individuals into their positions of leadership, and Donatist didn't. So they split. Donatist gained a lot of followers in Africa, North Africa, and so they essentially dominated that region during this time. So here we are in around 320. So over the next several years, Constantine and Licinius continued to drift apart, so much so that in 320, Licinius abandoned the Edict of Milan and began heavily persecuting the Christians in the east. He specifically targeted church property and confiscation, and he also targeted church leadership. So basically reversing the Edict of Milan, because in that edict, those individuals who had acquired property from a persecuted Christian were required to return the property back to the individual or the Christian that had previously owned the property, but they would be adequately compensated for doing so, to try to prevent animosity between, you know, those people that own the property and the Christian who had previously owned it. So Licinius basically denies the edict, starts persecuting the Christians. And so Constantine wrote that this was, you know, primarily the reason why he went to war against Licinius. This may be true, but it was also true that Constantine's ambition was to be the sole unifier of Rome. And so Licinius's renewed persecution of the Christians was really just what the doctor ordered in that goal. So now he had a good excuse to go to war with Licinius. So in 324, Constantine defeated Licinius, and Licinius surrendered, but was then ordered to be strangled by Constantine in 325, after Constantine determined that Licinius was actively seeking to revolt. So in 324, the Roman Empire was now ruled by a single man. Only the oldest generation had a memory of what was like to be ruled by a single emperor. So everyone else grew up in the government of Diocletian and his tetrarch. So Constantine's first order of business was to parse through all of the laws and throw out the ones that he did not agree with. One of the biggest reforms to the legal system that he concentrated on was Christianity. So he wrote a letter solely to the eastern provinces, primarily because they were the only region of the Roman Empire that held Galerius and Licinius' policies against the Christians. So he announced that on top of Christianity now being the one true religion, the church institution was going to have to have the full backing of the imperial government. Any Roman citizen who, as I mentioned, had acquired their land from a persecuted Christian was to have it returned. The difference was those individuals who were from the east would not be compensated for returning their property to the Christians. So he had a different relationship with the eastern part of the empire. He had, I don't know if disdain is the right word, but because of their attitude towards Christians, primarily because they were the kind of the eyesore in his goal of unifying Rome. So the eastern part of the empire was to return the property. They were not compensated for it. The support of Christianity became wider and deeper. So he sponsored the building of churches. He exempted clergy from tax obligations and allowed church leadership to use the imperial post, which was essentially a horse-drawn carriage that was usually only reserved for the most important imperial agents. And he also paid for all of their travel expenses. So whenever a bishop wanted to travel, they would get first-class seating and have all expenses paid. It was now the pagans in the East who found themselves tolerated and barred from holding office. It was the pagans who found their religious practices banned completely by Constantine. This was the most radical shift that Constantine had implemented. Overnight, he turned his back on centuries of tradition and millions of religious followers. He did not ban the Roman pantheon, but he did quit funding them and chose instead to fund church building around the empire. So he stopped funding all of the temples. This is when magnificent architectural churches began springing up all over the empire, including St. Peter's Basilica. Hey Anna, would you mind bringing over the Google map?
Do you want me to do that little guide?
Yeah. Can you slide that over?
The teams are in the library with Pastor Joe, if you guys would like to be
Sorry, the kid was here. Do you want?
So if you scan around,
in the.
so that's the front building of the St. Peter's Basilica.
That's pretty.
And that's where the Pope of, the main Pope, the main dog of the Catholic Church resides. You want to scroll around some more? I don't know if anybody has been there, but Laura, did you guys go there to St. Peter's Basilica?
Do you visit?
Yes.
Okay.
How do you not visit?
Yeah, that's like the prime. That's like the main.
Pretty sure we
Main
went to
joint.
that place.
Is that like a walkway?
Yeah, they have a. I think in this image they're getting ready for one of the popes to come out and speak. If you look, there's a bunch of seating set up. Actually, it's not this image. Huh, they must have changed it. Yeah, they hire people to go around with a camera and take pictures. So
One of those pyres, one of the pyres that killed a bunch of Christians.
yeah, if you go, oh, it's not shown here. That's right.
Do you want
Yeah.
me to move it?
Huh?
Can you like navigate across this?
Yeah, you can like drag or click on, if you turn around,
This way?
it will, yeah, keep going. It'll follow this path for a little bit, so keep going. Does it show an X along here? Oh,
Sorry,
that's changed since. That's all right. You can bring back the PowerPoint. So that is actually the background of this, is from inside the St. Peter's. Let's see if I got a better image. And then there's the underground is where they store all the secret documents. So that's the vaulted entrance to the, I think, essentially the basement.
It's like carved into the rock.
What's that?
Looks
I don't
like
know.
It's like carved into rock.
Did you guys read up on any of that when you were there? No. Did you guys go inside St. Peter's?
I did not.
You probably have to be on a list to get in there. So that was first built by Constantine. So now that Constantine defined the rules of the game, the citizens of Rome now began to fall in line. So you had ambitious citizens who wanted to advance in society begin converting to Christianity. Soldiers who wanted to move up in rank began converting to Christianity. And average citizens who didn't want to be given a hard time from imperial agents began converting to Christianity. So the Roman Empire was quickly converting to Christianity. So if you remember at this point in history, we start seeing the term universal or Catholic arise. So from this point on, I will, instead of deeming it the primary Christian movement, we'll call it the Catholic Church. So Constantine quickly found out that the primary Christian movement was all but unified, which was now dealing with a conflict that would last for hundreds of years. As we well know, the authors of Gospels speak of God, of Yeshua, and the Holy Spirit, but there is little on the relationship between them. And all three are divine, and one thing was certain among the early Christians, and that was they were, definitely monotheists. So Trinitas, the Latin word meaning threefold, had been a term used for 100 years by this point, as it was first coined by Tertullian around 200 AD when he attempted to describe the substance of God mentioned in the Gospels. The concept of the Trinity grew over the next 100 years within the primary movement until a presbyter, which is an elder in Cyrenaic, which is modern-day Libya, Egypt, by the name of Arius, held the position that Yeshua was not co-eternal with God the Father. So instead, Yeshua was created by God the Father prior to creation, and that he was subordinate to God the Father. So Yeshua possessed neither the eternity nor the true divinity of the Father, but was rather made God only by the Father's power. So this form of thinking may have been influenced by the Syrian culture, as prior to the introduction of Christianity, the individuals like this would have been descendants of Sumerians and Amorites who followed the god. One of their primary gods was the one we spoke of on Wednesday, was Baal. That was their weather god. They also had fertility god Ishtar, which was their creation god, their fertility god, and then their creation god Dagon. And their primary god was the sun god, Shamash, or Melekbel. So this was a pantheon, a hierarchical pantheon structure, and so it would have been tempting to apply that same belief structure to Christianity. So Arius' teachings began to gain traction after Diocletian's persecution was reversed by Constantine. And Arius' collection of writings called the Thalaia began circulating through Syria and Egypt. Arius had adopted his viewpoint that Yeshua existed prior to creation from the writings of Origen of Alexandria, who was a prolific theologian during the 2nd and 3rd century. So before long, Arius' teachings had spread east, and his followers were beginning to split the church in two. Both sides fought for control over regional bishop positions and their churches. This was happening just as Constantine was looking to make Christianity the state religion. And given his primary goal of unification, he was not pleased that upon stepping in the ranks of Christianity, he was already dealing with deunification. So from Constantine's viewpoint, the schism was over a trivial point, a trivial point of philosophy, but was hesitant on getting involved because of the Donatist heresy that we had just reviewed. So, Donatist is essentially a newborn babe in Christianity. So from his viewpoint, it's like, what are all these, windbags fighting about? What's the big deal? And it's also indicative of his primary goal, which was unifying, not the purity, retaining the purity of Christ. So instead, Constantine dispatched the bishop Hosius, who was also the chief ecclesiastical advisor to Constantine, to end the controversy Hosius carried a letter from Constantine that wrote that Constantine didn't take a particular side, but did admonish both sides for making such a big deal out of such a small issue. He viewed it all as abstract theology. The two sides agreed on 99% of the current issues, but it was just this one little insignificant matter, in his view, that they disagreed on. How could they have allowed it to explode into such a diverse issue? So when Hosius arrived in Alexandria, he failed to broker a deal because both sides were dug in deep, and because he didn't really want to do what Constantine had sent him to do. He wasn't interested in unifying the church. He was more interested in ousting Arius. So Hosius decided to convene a meeting of Eastern bishops in the Anatolian city of Ancyria to help bring an end to the argument by joining together in one voice against Arius. The meeting was presented as an open dialogue forum, but Hosius had no intention of allowing Arius his open dialogue. So it was to be really a one-sided debate. So when Hosius reported back to Constantine that he had established the council, this council, Constantine decided to make it a global council in order that it be moved to the port city of Nicaea, and then invited all the Western bishops as well, because they were his primary supporter. The location would be beneficial to the Western bishops who would attend, and if Constantine happened to be in the area, he could pop in and offer some advice. So over 1,800 bishops were invited, but in May of 325, only 300 attended, kicking off the Council of Nicaea. So even though only a few hundred bishops attended, they brought them with them a list of priests and aides, making the final attendance somewhere in the thousands. So the two most important individuals at the meeting outside of Constantine was Arius and a deacon named Athanasius of Alexandria. So Athanasius was a hardliner against Arian and was there to make sure that the Bishop of Alexandria stayed true to the course of opposing Arius. Shortly after the council, Athanasius would succeed the current Bishop of Alexandria as the head bishop, the head guru of Alexandria. And he would become a huge polarizing force within the Catholic Church. Because of this, he quickly became at odds with Constantine and would find himself exiled 5 times over the course of his life. So Constantine would die, he would return, and then Constantine's son would pick up, and the schisms would still arise, and then so Constantine's son would kick him out, and so on. So during the meeting, the Council of Nicaea, Constantine suggested that the leaders take the opportunity to rule on a host of other disagreements, including when Easter should be celebrated, what the final status of those who had lapsed during the persecution would be. So, just so you folks are aware, real quickly, last weekend we looked at the Donatists, which was a Anabaptist movement that came out of the ending of the Diocletian's persecution. The primary movement, Christian primary movement, started reinstituting individuals who had, prior to the persecution, had positions of authority. During the persecution, they basically denounced Christ and turned over Holy Scriptures, and then once persecution was over, the church wanted to reinstate them into their position of authority. And so the Donatists opposed that and felt like they didn't, because of their denial of Christ, they should not return to a position of authority. So that's when Donatists split out of the main movement and established the Donatist movement. So, in the Council of Nicaea, they established that this issue that arose with the Donatists, that those who had walked away from the faith should be, in fact, reinstituted into their positions of authority. They also established 20 laws and called them canons, which were essentially rules of discipline. And those 20 laws I have here. So, prohibition of self-castration for clergy. Yes, that was pretty common back then. Establishment of a minimum term for catechumens, persons studying for baptism. Prohibition of a man and a woman who have both taken vows of chastity to live together in a chaste and non-legalized partnership. Ordination of a bishop in the presence of at least 3 provincial bishops, and confirmation by the metropolitan bishop. Provision of 2 provincial synods to be held annually. Confirmation of ancient customs giving jurisdiction over large regions to the bishops of Alexandria, Rome, and Antioch. So further further centralizing authority over churches. Recognition of the honorary rights of the See of Jerusalem. Provision for agreement with the Novatianists and early sect. So this is evidence that, we looked at the Novatians that were around 200 AD, which split for similar reasons as the Donatists. So further evidence that they were still alive and active. Elders who had been ordained without sufficient examination were not to be recognized. Elders who had lapsed but had not been found out were to be deposed. Mercy was enjoined toward those who had lapsed without compulsion, even though it was recognized that they did not deserve it. Those who had left the military but later sought out to be restored to their military positions were to be excommunicated depending on the sincerity of, that shouldn't be their repentance. They could be readmitted to communion earlier. Those who were fulfilling penance could receive communion if they were dying, but if they got well again, they were to finish their penance. Catechumens who lapsed were to have 3 years as heirs before being allowed to become catechumens again. Bishops, presbyters, and deacons were not to wander into neighboring cities to officiate, so respecting the boundary of the authority of other bishops. Clergy who refused to return to their home church were to be excommunicated, and the ordination of those who were ordained by those wandering clergy were to be considered null and void. Prohibition of usury among the clergy. I'm assuming that's alcohol primarily. Precedence of bishops and presbyters before deacons is in receiving the Eucharist, Holy Communion. Declaration of the invalidity of baptism by Paulian heretics. Prohibition of kneeling, that's not Paulicians, who we'll get into here in a few weeks, but prohibition of kneeling on Sundays and during the Pentecost. Standing was the normative posture for prayer at this time, as it is still among the Eastern Christians. Kneeling was considered most appropriate to penitential prayer as distinct from the festive nature of Eastertide and its remembrance every Sunday. The canon was designed only to ensure uniformity of practice at the designated times. So they established the 20 laws, and they also established what to do about the Meletians, who were a sect in the east, primarily in Egypt, were beginning to follow in the ways of the Donatists. So they too opposed the authority of the bishops, but they wouldn't last very long. They'd last a couple hundred years. So ultimately, Constantine wanted all schisms resolved within the church and wasn't interested in who was right and what interpretation was best. By the end of the council, which had lasted 2 to 3 months, almost all of the moderate Arians felt the pressure of being excommunicated, and so they accepted the new description of Yeshua as being the same substance of God the Father. Only 2 of the Arian bishops refused to sign the creed, and so Constantine exiled them in Arius. So here's the creed that came out of the Council of Nicaea. So we believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible, and then one Lord, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, begotten from the Father, only begotten. That is, so this term here was implemented to kind of satisfy those more moderate Arians. So from the substance of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, of one substance with the Father, through whom all things came into being, things in heaven and things on earth, who because of us men and because of our salvation came down and became incarnate and became man and suffered and rose again on the third day and ascended to the heavens and will come to judge the living and the dead. And then the Holy Spirit. But as for those who say there was when he was not, and before being born he was not, and that he came into existence out of nothing, or who assert that the Son of God is of different hypostatus or substance, or created, or is subject to alteration or change, these the Catholic and Apostolic Church anathematize, which I'm not sure what it means, but I'm assuming it's negative. So basically they're announcing that those that don't follow this creed are basically heretics.
Yeah.
How prevalent is this creed in current Catholic Church? Do they still?
I think there's been a few minor changes that they've made to that, but most of it is generally about the same.
Yeah. How interested are you guys in continuing looking at the Roman Church or the Catholic Church in Rome as we go through the history? Do you guys want to keep going down that line, or do you want to skip ahead to more relevant, in terms of Anabaptists? Because out of the Catholic Church, we start getting the Eastern Orthodox churches, and there's a lot of splits from the Catholic Church. So I don't know, what do you guys feel like covering?
I thought you were going to go into the Crusades instead.
Yeah. If that interests you, we can do that. Huh? Okay.
This is interesting, because I've always known about Anabaptists, but being unsure, see the direction.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we reach a major split at this point because now you've got Council of Nicaea basically consolidates whatever leadership fell in line with the government of Rome, and then basically continued to be the state church.
Right.
And then whoever did not go to the Council of Nicaea, because they wanted to stay separate from the state.
Yeah.
We're basically, well, left out of the state church at this point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I would, at the very least, I was planning on covering the next 50 or so years because even though, the Catholic Church is established at this point, it hasn't officially became the Church of Rome until, I think it's Theodosius Emperor. So it's like most things, it's a process, right? So through Constantine and his sons, it's starting to form into that position, and then it's officially, it's made official a little later on. So we'll cover that, and then if you guys want, we'll just continue going through Rome, and then as we hit the periods where Anabaptists, another Anabaptist group comes up, we'll cover that as well.
Thank you.
Good. Sound good?
sounds good.
All right.
One of the biggest things that happens around this point of time is the fact that since Constantine makes the church the state church, and as we talked about that, people just sort of fell in line and joined the state church because they didn't want to have any problems, or it gave them the ability to move up, the chain of command in the military, or gave them prominence as far as if they were big in commerce or something like that. We basically have a large number of people joining the church, and I think this would be kind of different from the situation that you had when the church was, when the Christian movement first started in Jerusalem. The fact that back then you have like 3,000 people joining a day. I mean, the difference between this Christian movement and Judaism is, the simple difference is, the belief that in the Messiah.
Yeah, and I'll go into essentially what the personality of these churches is at this time. Completely different than what it was, even 50 years before this. It makes a huge shift. So, yeah. All right. Any other comments or questions? Pastor?
What the heck are you teaching in our church for the Council of Nicaea up there, the creed?
I'm informing.
I know.
We're converting or we die.
Yeah.
Convert or die. Well, this is not
We're
Islam.
we're heretics for life.
What were the Paulian heretics that baptism wasn't recognized in the previous screen? I was just curious if you had mentioned before and I missed it, or if it's...
No. I briefly looked into it. See if I can find it in my notes here. I should probably have covered that. See if I can search for it. So what I shamelessly copied just what I found on Wikipedia, because I couldn't find much about him, but it was led by Paul from Antioch, and he stated that Jesus was an ordinary man who was born without pre-existence. So he kind of shared the Arian viewpoint, He believed the divine Logos word dwelt in Jesus just as a guiding force, and that Jesus only achieved oneness with God through his righteous life. This was a strict rejection of Jesus' full divinity and concept of the Trinity.
Okay, that makes sense, cause it's similar to the previous divergence that
Right.
Constantine was
Yeah.
trying to reconcile. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, the idea of the Trinity came to full head at this point. There was a lot of different ideas on the Trinity.
Thank you.
Yeah. Not to be mistaken with the Paulicians, which come another 200 years from now. So
This is around 300-ish?
yeah, 324, 325. So far we have the Novatians. Here we go. We have the Montanists first, the Novatians, and now the Donatists. I believe the Mennonites heavily reference the Donatists as their forefathers. And the Quakers. Why am I blanking? Well, the Quakers, but who are the ones that don't have technology? Amish. There we go.
They're fun to study. Modern day Amish or fun?
Not same movement,
Huh?
same movement,
Yeah.
Aren't there two
geographical.
types of Amish people?
I'm sure there's more than
I just
two.
know the ones I've seen on TV shows I've watched.
I think
Honestly.
Mennonites.
people
those
kind
are
of-
the
Oh,
ones.
yeah.
All I know is
Mennonites.
the
Mennonites,
letter can't
Amish.
stop me.
Yeah.
I mean, I respect all the things that they don't have and don't do. I mean, we could all be better off not having TVs.
Amish people don't have
I learned a lot from TV, I don't know.
Mennonites.
Yeah,
It's a tool, man,
I know.
used for good or bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Ideas are